My own father is planning to sell me to the cripple in the next village, just for some grain. And all for what? Half a bag of moldy wheat bran. He actually claims that moldy trash is the only thing keeping, but he has absolutely no idea a single compressed biscuit I can pull right out of thin air has more calories than that entire bag of dry bran. And in the system mall inside my head, a whole box of these biscuits cost only one single gold coin. The land is cracked and barren for miles. Starving corpses litter the ground. In these final years of the Beijing dynasty, this brutal drought has turned humans into savage beasts. Inside our collapsing thatched hut, the scorching wind forces yellow dust right down our throats. My pathetic excuse of a father, old man Sue, is clutching a ragged sack like his life depends on it. He's shaking like a leaf. Inside is just half a pound of blackened wheat bran, mixed with dirt and gravel, and that is me. Or rather, the price my predecessor, Su-hee, was sold for. Jaya, don't blame your father for being cruel. If I don't hand you over to Cripple Zhang, your little brother Changle is going to starve to death tonight. Old man Su's eyes are bloodshot and wild, like an old beast backed into a corner. I lean against the cracked mud wall, watching him with cold, detached eyes. The previous owner of this body was literally driven to her death by anger over this making way for my soul. A modern agricultural expert, Cripple Zhang has already beaten 3 wives to death. Going to his house is a death sentence. Father, trading my life for half a bag of literal garbage. Can you actually sleep at night? My voice is ice cold. Gone is every trace of her former weakness. Old man Su shudders under my icy glare. He stammers, too terrified to utter a single word. Right at that moment, a sharp electronic chime rings in my head. Ding! Dimensional exchange system successfully activated. I let out a cold laugh inside. My cheat code has finally arrived. The system interface materializes right before my eyes. Any item of value can be converted into gold coins. But as I look around this place, many's for best Elanda money, to believes the regarding these what am I supposed to trade? Suddenly, my fingers brush against a hard lump in my pocket. It's a small chunk of wild ginger I accidentally dug up while foraging on the mountain, withered and shriveled. It is not worth a single penny in modern times, but in ancient times, ginger was an extremely rare spice and medicine. Ding. System valuation. System has detected pure, natural, wild, ancient ginger. Highly potent medicinal value. Exchangeable for 10 gold coins. Without a second thought, I traded it all and purchased the newbie gift pack. 10 pounds of premium modern flour. With a flash of white light, a heavy cloth bag materialized out of thin air in the blind spot behind the water vat. 10 pounds of snow white, finely milled modern flour is worth a fortune in this desperate dog-eat-dog famine. As night fell, starving all day, Father Su clutched that bag of bran husks and fell into a deep sleep. My younger brother, Chango, was whimpering from hunger in the corner. I got up in the dark and lit the stove. I scraped the very last drop of muddy well water from the bottom of the vat and brought it to a boil. Then I untied the flour bag. The pure, rich scent of wheat instantly drifted out. There wasn't a single impurity in it. Quickly, I kneaded the dough, rolled it out, and sliced it into noodles. As the plump white noodles slid into the boiling water, the rich aroma exploded inside our cramped, drafty, thatched hut. In a village where even the tree bark had been gnawed clean, this smell was an absolute bombshell. Gulp. The sound of someone swallowing hard came from behind me. I didn't even notice when Father Su and Changle had woken up. The two of them stared intently at the white noodles swirling in the pot, their eyes practically popping out of their heads. Sister, is that white flour? Am I dead? Am I dreaming? Trangle's voice was trembling. I scooped out 3 large bowls of noodles and served them piping hot with broth on the table. I coldly uttered 4 words. Shut up and eat. Father Su couldn't even hold his chopsticks steady. He reached out with his bare hands to grab the scalding noodles, tears streaming down his face. Our ancestors have blessed us. Where on earth did this come from? With a bowl of hot noodle soup in our bellies, the feeling of being on the brink of death was finally pushed back. Just as I was about to clean up, bam! The already rickety wooden door was kicked wide open. "Get up, Sue the Second! Stop playing dead!" My eldest aunt's shrill, grating voice pierced the night sky like a screech owl. "I've brought Lame Jong. Take her away tonight. And that half bag of wheat bran is all yours." Outside, the red glow of torches illuminated my eldest aunt's greedy face. Behind her stood a fierce, thuggish-looking old man with a heavy limp. I stared at the two of them standing outside. A cold smirk played on my lips. They were just delivering themselves to me. My eldest aunt barged into the room. Her nose twitched like a bloodhound. "What smells so good?" "Sue the Second, did you guys hide grain?" Her shifty, triangular eyes were filled with deep suspicion. Her eyes darted greedily all over the room. Thank goodness I was quick on my feet. The moment I heard the door rattle, I had kicked the empty bowl into the straw pile under the stove. "You must have smelled wrong, Auntie. We've eaten all the famine clay in the house. Where would we get any grain?" I casually brushed the dust off my clothes, my tone perfectly calm. "Cut the crap!" my aunt snapped. "Brother Jang, she's right here. Hurry up and take her!" With a rough shove, my eldest aunt pushed Lame Jong into the room. Lame Jong bared his mouthful of yellow teeth. He rubbed his hands together and lunged at me with a sickening leer, dragging his lame leg. "Eldest girl, come home with me. I'll make sure you get a full meal." Seeing those filthy hands about to touch my clothes, a flash of killing intent crossed my eyes. "System, recycle that coarse cloth bag that had the flour and exchange it for a canister of potent knockout spray." Ding! Recycle successful. Exchange complete. A tiny canister, no larger than a lipstick, slipped quietly into my palm. I never would have expected that. As a modern agricultural expert on the first day of March, I'd be launching a chemical attack. The exact second Lame Jang lunged at me, I dodged sharply to the side. With a light press of my fingertip, the colorless, odorless gas sprayed directly into his nose and mouth. In just 3 short seconds, Lim Jong's movement suddenly froze. His eyes rolled back violently. His vile, lustful grin instantly twisted into pure terror. The neuro agent completely short-circuited his brain. "Ghost! It's a ghost! Widow Lee has come back for my life! Don't kill me!" he shrieked, letting out a blood-curdling scream that didn't even sound human. He suddenly spun around and grabbed Aunt's throat. "Cousin, what are you doing?" "I'm your cousin. Help!" Caught completely off guard, Aunt was pinned straight to the ground. Lame Jong's fists rained down on her face. The commotion in that thatched cottage instantly alerted the neighbors. When the villagers rushed in with torches, they were met with the sight of Lame Jong foaming at the mouth, savagely beating Aunt like a rabid dog. I quickly ducked behind Father Sue, timing it perfectly, and shrieked at the top of my lungs, "Everyone, look! Lame Jong has done so many horrible things. He's finally getting what he deserves. Heaven is punishing him. Aunt insisted on forcing this wicked marriage on us. Even God is angry." People in ancient times were deeply superstitious. Watching the crazed Lame Jong, the villagers backed away in sheer terror. The way they looked at Aunt completely changed. Without hesitation, the village chief ordered the men to tie up the madman and throw him back into his house. With the marriage completely ruined, I seized the opportunity to strike. Pointing at the smashed door, I glared at her. "Aunt, you brought a lunatic to break down our door? And he almost killed someone. You think you're not going to pay for this? This isn't over." Aunt had been beaten black and blue. Under the judgmental stares and whispers of the villagers, she could only swallow her rage. Trembling, she pulled 2 strings of copper coins from her coat, threw them to the ground, and scurried away in disgrace. Once the crowd dispersed, a deathly silence filled the room. Father Sue stared intently at the copper coins on the floor, then looked up at me, trembling from head to toe. "Dad? Yeah? What on earth did you do?" Why did Lame Jong suddenly go mad? I picked up the copper coins and blew the dust off them. To deal with a cowardly, blindly obedient father like him, I had to use strong medicine. "Father, last night I had a dream. I dreamed of the Supreme Lord." I lied without batting an eye. The Supreme Lord told me that my time has not yet come. He didn't just grant me divine food, but he also bestowed upon me a sacred spell of protection. Lame Jiang was just struck by the Lord's divine lightning. Father Su's eyes widened in sheer shock. With a loud thud, he fell to his knees, kowtowing frantically toward the ceiling. In this dog-eat-dog era, playing the mystic is the only way to survive and stand tall. It was late at night, and Father Su and Changle had finally fallen fast asleep. I sat on the doorstep, planning out my moves for tomorrow. But right then, the system radar on my retina suddenly started flashing like crazy. A red warning dot was rushing toward us from just outside the courtyard wall. Under the dim moonlight, I saw a bloated shadow creeping over the top of the wall. It was my eldest aunt. She was holding a fire starter in her hand, her eyes gleaming with pure malice, like a venomous snake staring dead at the roof of our thatched hut. That old hag. She never learns, does she? She is rotten to the very core. The red warning dot on my system panel flashed frantically. I quietly pressed myself against the crack in the window, watching coldly as she tiptoed up to our wall like a fat, bloated rat. She held up her fire starter, sparks flickering in the pitch-black night. Then, she violently threw a burning wooden stick right onto our thatched roof. Months of drought had left the thatch bone dry, and it caught fire instantly. Flames roared up more than half a meter high, greedily devouring our fragile roof. Burn to death, you miserable little bastards. I'll teach you to get cocky. If I can't have it, none of you are getting a single bite. My aunt hissed under her breath, cursing us venomously. In the dancing flames, her old face contorted like a demon crawling straight out of hell. But I didn't panic at all. Honestly, I almost wanted to laugh. Trying to play with fire against a modern person who owns a cross-dimensional mall? You're begging for death. System, exchange those 2 jars of coins my aunt paid us for a mini dry powder fire extinguisher. Thing! Exchange successful. Deducting 10 gold coins. My hands instantly felt heavy as a small red metal canister appeared out of thin air. I kicked open the rickety wooden door and stepped outside like a god of wrath. Inside, Father Su and Changle were choked awake by the thick smoke, stumbling their way out. The moment they saw the blazing fire, their legs buckled in sheer terror and they collapsed onto the ground. Heaven is trying to destroy our Su family! What did we do to deserve this? Father Su beat his chest, howling in utter despair. Father, get back! Lord Lao has granted us a miracle! With long, confident strides, I stepped right in front of the roaring. With swift, clean movements, I yanked out the safety pin. Grabbing the hose with one hand, I aimed it right at the flames on the roof and squeezed the lever hard. Under the immense pressure, a cloud of white, dry powder erupted like a sudden blizzard. To these ancient onlookers, this was an absolutely mind-blowing sight. In the middle of this scorching, dry season, a wave of white mist, carrying a sharp, pungent odor, instantly smothered the raging beast of a fire in the dead of night. In just 5 seconds, the fire was out. Nothing was left but a vast, blinding sheet of white powder, clinging to the charred roof like winter frost. A deathly silence fell over the area. Even the wind seemed to stop. Oh, my sweet Lord. What kind of divine magic is that? The towering flames had already alerted the entire village. The villagers who had rushed over with torches saw everything. They watched in absolute awe as I seemingly summoned the wind and rain to bring down divine. Every single one of them froze dead in their tracks. Some even fell to their knees with a heavy thud, trembling. I casually tossed the empty fire extinguisher back into my system space and turned to look at my aunt, who was slumped against the wall, paralyzed in the exact posture of throwing the torch. Aunt, the Supreme Lord is furious. You dared to set fire to a disciple of the immortals. This is an unforgivable sin that will bring down heaven. I stared down at her, my voice as cold as ice. My aunt was so terrified, she literally wet her pants. She pointed a shaking finger at me, shivering violently. She shrieked like a lunatic. A monster! You're a monster! Everyone, quick! Burn him to death. Chief, this wicked woman committed arson in the dead of night to murder her own kin. Under the laws of our realm, what is her punishment? I turned a sharp, demanding gaze toward the village chief, who was shivering in the crowd, staring at the divine miracle on the roof. The chief was now filled with utter dread and reverence. He waved his arms and barked orders immediately. Tie her up. Tie this black-hearted hag up right now. First thing tomorrow morning, we drag her to the county court. The next morning, amidst her desperate wails, my aunt was dragged away by the county bailiffs. Awaiting her in the dark dungeons was nothing but brutal, inhumane torture. But before I could even celebrate, the village chief returned from his trip to the county seat and brought back news that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. Grain prices in the county seat had skyrocketed tenfold overnight. The city gates have been shut tight. Now, even if you have money, you can't buy a single grain of rice. Stroking my chin, I stared at the few remaining gold coins in my system interface. The true crisis of this famine year has only just begun to show its fangs. Before the panic of the famine could even spread through the village, a devastating water shortage choked the life out of everyone. The scorching sun beat down relentlessly, like a giant furnace trying to bake the earth to a crisp. The only deep well in the village had been bone dry for 3 whole days. All that was left at the bottom was a foul, rancid puddle of yellow mud. Just to fight over a single gulp of that dirty sludge, the village butcher slashed his neighbor's arm open with a meat cleaver. In times like these, when even the grassroots had been dug up, a brutal dog-eat-dog nightmare was about to unfold. Sis, I'm so thirsty. My little brother lay on a tattered straw mat, licking his dry, bleeding lips. His throat was so raw he could bear sounding as weak and fragile as a newborn kitten. I felt his burning forehead, my eyes narrowing with fierce determination. I turned on my heel and headed straight for the dried-up well in the center of the village. My system mall didn't just have food. It also had all kinds of cross-dimensional sci-fi tech. System, search for something to fix a dried-up water source. Ding! Recommended item. High permeability aquifer purification agent. Price, 50 gold coins. I grit my teeth and threw all the cheap silver jewelry and copper coins I'd scavenged from my greedy aunt's house into the system's recycling bin. It was just barely enough to scrape together 50 gold coins. Under the cover of a pitch-black night, I slipped away to the edge of the well and dropped the glowing blue chemical pill dead center into the bottomless, pitch-dark pit. Gurgle. Gurgle. At first, there was only a faint, bubbling sound, but then it was as if a sleeping dragon deep beneath the earth had suddenly been awakened. The roaring sound of rushing water echoed violently through the pitch-black depths. The water level began to surge upward at an unbelievable speed, swallowing the thick mud, drowning the stone walls, rising higher and higher. At dawn, when the first villager trudged over with a wooden bucket and peeked inside, he let out a deafening, hysterical scream. Water! There's water! It's crystal clear, fresh spring water. The entire village went wild. With bloodshot eyes, they grabbed pots, pans, and buckets, charging toward the well like a pack of slam! I slammed a heavy wood cleaver deep into the wooden post right at the edge of the well. The blade buried itself deep into the wood, instantly freezing the frenzied crowd in their tracks. The water in this well was given to me by Lord Lau. I glared at the crowd, my gaze ice cold. You want a drink? Fine, but you'll have to pay with your life. Hearing this, several of the local village thugs instantly lost their tempers. Sudaya rolled up his sleeves, swearing up a storm. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm getting water today, and nobody's stopping me. What are you gonna do about it? I let out a cold sneer. I drew my machete, pointing it right at his nose. Go ahead, try me. The Lord granted this water, and he can easily take it away. If any of you dare to take it by force, I will make this well run bone dry instantly. We can all die of thirst together. My aunt's miserable fate was still fresh in their minds, and the lingering terror of the divine snowstorm I conjured last night. The village thugs were completely paralyzed by the sheer murderous intent in my eyes. They gulped hard and reluctantly took half a step back. Starting today, every able-bodied man in this village answers to me. I will provide you with food and water, and in return, you will build walls and defend my home. Obey my orders. In this chaotic world, I was going to build an absolutely impenetrable fortress. And this well was my ultimate bargaining chip. After a perfect display of carrot and stick negotiation, just to survive, every single worker in the village completely bowed down to me. I, Soo-hee, officially became the undisputed boss of this village. Just as I was organizing everyone to line up for water, a sudden, heavy thud echoed from the entrance of the village. A man in black, covered in blood, plummeted straight out of the old locust tree, crashing heavily into the dust right beside the well. Frowning, I stepped forward and used the tip of my foot to brush aside the bloody, matted hair covering his face. He was an incredibly handsome young man. His features were sharp and striking. Even though he was completely unconscious, his hands still gripped a broken sword with ironclad strength, radiating a dangerous aura of lethal intent. But my eyes were locked onto the loose hem of his robe. Hidden there, embroidered in subtle dark gold thread, was a fierce five-clawed golden dragon, the exclusive totem of the imperial family. My cash cow had just delivered himself right to my doorstep. He was still breathing, but barely. Under the flickering light of the torches, the young man's breathing was as weak as a dying candle in a storm. The puncture wound on his chest was still bubbling with black blood, a clear sign of severe poisoning. Even in his unconscious state, his fingers still gripped the broken sword in a death grip, his knuckles turning a ghostly white from the sheer strain. Is he not going to make it? Timidly, she hid behind me, her tiny hand clutching the hem of my shirt. I didn't say a word. I squatted down and pressed my palm against his burning forehead. This temperature had to be at least 40 degrees. In this desolate year of famine, with no doctors and no medicine, this was a direct death warrant from the king of hell. System, scan vital signs, and analyze the value of that jade pendant. Ding! Target is severely dehydrated, suffering from a pulmonary infection, and has been lethally poisoned with aconite. Vital signs are at 12%. Immediate injection of compound antibiotics and antitoxin is recommended. Ding! Imperial-grade mutton, fat white jade dragon, and phoenix-matching pendants detected. Superb craftsmanship. System appraisal value: 5,000 gold coins. Would you like to pawn it? 5,000 gold coins? This is an absolute jackpot! Court it! I commanded in my mind without a second thought. A flash of white light, visible only to me, swept across. In an instant, the exquisitely carved jade pendant at the boy's waist vanished. In its place, a blinking balance appeared on the system interface. Exchange for ciprofloxacin, a tetanus shot, and a potent detox oral liquid. Using my sleeve as cover, I pulled out a syringe and cleanly injected it into his cold vein. Then I pinched his jaw and forced the cool, refreshing system spring water and medicine down his throat. Once the whole process was finished, the eyelashes of the previously lifeless boy actually fluttered slightly. An hour later, he suddenly snapped his eyes open. His gaze was as cold and sharp as a blade. The broken sword was instantly pressed against my throat. "Who are you? Where is my jade pendant?" he asked, his voice raspy, sounding like it had been dragged across gravel. But the innate, authoritative pressure of a ruler still clung to him like a shadow. I extended 2 fingers and slowly, deliberately pushed the icy blade away. I let out a cold laugh. Your savior. As for the jade pendant, that was my medical fee. Do you want your life, or do you want your jade? He froze. In the capital, no one probably ever dared to speak to a prince like that. He looked around, a ruined, dried-up well, and the parched, cracked earth, along with the dirt-caked peasant girl standing before him, her eyes burning with sheer arrogance. What did you make me drink? He could feel his inner energy, previously frozen solid, suddenly starting to flow again. Elixir of the gods? I just made that up on the spot. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my skirt. Now that you're awake, Lord Jiang, don't just lay around the well, blocking the villagers from getting water. He stared at my straight, his eyes filled with deep shock and intense curiosity. Little did he know, just moments ago, the system officially upgraded because of that dragon and phoenix jade pendant, unlocking the extract anything feature. From this moment on, I might not have a say in this land's drought. But when it comes to the harvest, even God doesn't get the final word. Making the dry well flow again was just the appetizer. I am going to bring this dead earth back to life. Right after the system upgrade, the very first thing I did was use the extraction feature. I extracted the most powerful, drought-resistant, high-yielding gene from the system's database and injected it directly into the 3 mu of dry land at the edge of the village, which had cracked open with half-foot-wide fissures. Woo! Yeah! Are you crazy? Planting sweet potatoes in this kind of weather is just a waste of seeds. Old Man Sue stomped his feet on the ridge of the field, tears streaming down his face. The Grand Pure One manifested to save us from starvation, not for you to throw it all away like this. The entire village was waiting to watch me fail. In this scorched, barren wasteland, even a cactus would dry up. Who would believe anything could grow in this dry sand? I didn't say a word. I just planted the vibrant green sweet potato vines, one by one, into the scorching hot soil. On the first day, the vines didn't wither. On the second day, green sprouts poked through. On the third day, the entire edge of the village, across the hills and fields, was covered in a breathtaking, vibrant green. Those sweet potato vines grew like crazy. They looked like a dazzling emerald, resting in the middle of a withered, barren wasteland. So beautiful it took my breath away. A miracle! A miracle has truly happened! Old Man Sue knelt on the ridge of the field, sobbing as he slapped his own face repeatedly. Having been weak and cowardly his entire life, his mind was completely blown. And he immediately he began strutting through the village, chest puffed out, bragging to everyone he met. Did you see that? My daughter is a legendary deity descended from the heavens. These aren't just crops. They are absolute gold. The food grown from just this one single acre can feed the entire county, but a cold shiver runs down my spine. You should never flaunt your wealth. In times of war and chaos, a lush green field like this is even— And sure enough, trouble comes knocking way faster than the harvest. Before we can even start harvesting, a chaotic thundering of hooves erupts from the village entrance. Surrounded by more than 10 guards, a bright red sedan chair comes crashing ruthlessly into our village. The curtain is violently flung open, and out steps a greasy, bloated pig of a man wearing a 5th-rank official robe. This is the greedy local magistrate. His eyes, buried deep inside rolls of fat, lock onto our 3 acres of lush, green, sweet potato field and flare up with pure, wicked greed. This office has caught wind of dark sorcery in Sioux Village. Someone is using black magic to force these crops to grow. Magistrate Shen sneers coldly. Slapping his folding fan shut, he points a stubby finger at my family's fields and barks. Confiscate every single one of these seize everything, and throw the Sioux family into the dungeon. Bring them to the court. They will explain exactly where they stole this dark magic. My father is absolutely terrified. He collapses to his knees, begging for mercy. But my hand is already slipping into my sleeve, gripping a clutch of custom-made, high-potency. I'm just about to strike, but right at that exact second, thick clouds of dust erupt from the distant horizon. Dozens of elite royal guards clad in heavy black armor, charging on horseback under dark imperial flags. They sweep in like a terrifying black hurricane. An imperial decree has arrived. We search for the sacred crops and to welcome the Holy Maiden. Anyone who interferes with the imperial harvest will be executed on the spot. The leading general's eyes instantly lock onto capturing me covered in dirt, and the man standing right behind me with a chilling, piercing gaze, the 9th prince. Magistrate Shen's bloated face drains of all color instantly. With a pathetic thud, he rolls right off his sedan chair and onto the dirt. I look at the charging war horses, and a cold smirk plays on my lips. My chessboard for this chaotic world is only no one, absolutely no one, is touching my crop. Magistrate Shen lies sprawled on the ground like a pathetic puddle of mud, Every single roll of his fat is shaking like a leaf. The dozens of heavily armed royal guards dismount in perfect, terrifying unison. The sharp, heavy clanking of their iron armor echoes through the dead silence of the village. The leading general, clad in jet-black armor, drops heavily onto one knee. He clasps his hands in respect, and his voice thunders across the land. By imperial decree, we humbly request the Holy Maiden and the divine crops to enter the capital to be granted an audience with the emperor. I glanced at the ninth prince, Jiangsi, who stood right behind the envoy's seat. He had changed into a low-key, dark casual robe, but those deep eyes of his were filled with an unvarnished, probing gaze. I'll go to the capital. I patted the dirt off my hands. My voice was calm, without a single ripple of emotion. But I have to bring my people. And another thing, we take the route I choose. Beside me, my dad was trembling with fear. He grabbed my sleeve in a death grip, stammering, Dea. That is the Imperial Palace. If they catch us faking things, our entire family, down to 9 generations, will be executed. Dad, put your heart at ease. The Grand Supreme Lord Laozi is watching over us from heaven, keeping us safe. I casually reassured the timid old man, but in reality, I knew better than anyone. This journey to the capital is bound to be a complete death trap. The reigning emperor is on his deathbed. The princes and lords have already lost their minds in the bloody battle for the throne. Now that I hold the divine seeds, I'm just a walking piece of fat, radiating a deadly, tempting aroma. Before I arrive at that soul-eating capital, I must wrap myself in an unbreakable golden armor. 3 days later, the massive caravan set off. By the time we reached Loma Slope, the sky had grown completely dark. The terrain here was extremely perilous. There were nothing but barren mountains on both sides. And right now, tens of thousands of starving refugees were densely packed all over the slopes. They were dressed in rags and so starving that their eyes were literally glowing green. Like a pack of hungry wolves, they stared intently at our carriage and guards. The Imperial Guards unsheathed their coldly gleaming blades one after another, completely surrounding my carriage. The air instantly grew thick with tension. Don't attack! They're just hungry. I took a deep breath. In my mind, I quickly ordered the system to open them all. Search for something that can pull off a jaw-dropping stunt in front of 10,000 people and is a visually stunning, harmless item. Ding! Recommending the holographic bionic fluorescent butterfly swarm. Covers a radius of 1 kilometer and comes with a calming, soothing aroma. Price, 5,000 gold coins. Without hesitation, I tapped exchange. I used the 2 chests of official silver that Magistrate Shen had shoved at me to save his own skin before I left, converting them into gold coins. Put your swords away. First, I pull back the carriage curtain, lifting my skirt as I slowly step down. The night wind is piercingly cold, cutting like a knife. Alone, I walk straight into the open clearing where the refugees and Imperial Guards are facing off. Everyone, including Jiangxi, stares at me like I'm a lunatic. Just as the refugees are about to lose control and lunge forward, I press the activation button inside my system space. Boom! There is no deafening explosion, only a light so blindingly brilliant, it takes your breath away. Thousands of giant butterflies, glowing with an eerie blue light, surge out from the pitch-black void. They look like a glittering Milky Way poured straight into the mortal realm, swirling and dancing wildly all around me. The night is completely illuminated. Those butterflies land gracefully on the withered hands of the refugees and on the cold, sharp blades of the Imperial Guards. With waves of a strange, warm fragrance filling the air, everyone's rising panic and rage are instantly put to rest. 10,000 butterflies bowing in worship. It's the miracle of 10,000 butterflies bowing in worship. Someone in the crowd cries out with tears in their voice, and in an instant, a massive wave of refugees across the hills falls to their knees, kowtowing frantically. Even the Royal Imperial Guards cannot withstand such awe. One by one, they drop their blades, prostrating themselves in the mud, their faces filled with utter reverence. Even the one who has been calmly watching from the sidelines, the incredibly scheming ninth prince Jiangxi, takes a sudden step back. He stares intently at me, bathed in this divine, holy glow, and the pride deep within his eyes finally begins to crack. The divine miracle has descended! Heaven bless the great Jing! That night, the miracle of the 10,000 butterflies spread as if it had grown wings, sweeping across the entire land at an astonishing speed. By the next morning, when our carriage convoy arrives at the next prefecture's courier station, the outside is already packed, shoulder to shoulder. Those noble lords and heads of the great, powerful clans, who once held their heads high and wouldn't even deign to look at a commoner, have now stripped away their luxurious robes. Dressed in plain, simple clothes, they line up respectfully in a queue stretching for miles. Kneeling in the muddy road outside the station, they hold up heavy lamb deeds high in their hands, heavy chests of gold, and even their most precious family heirlooms, all just to catch a single glimpse of the saintess and seek a blessing of her divine favor. I lean lazily against the second-floor windowsill, gently swirling a cup of cheap tea in my hand, looking down at this absolute madhouse of a crowd. Now this is the ultimate armor I was looking for. Starting today, forgot about that dying excuse of an emperor. Even the Almighty himself would have to think twice before touching me, lest they face the fury of the common people and the spit of the elite clans. With this glittering, invincible cheat code of my spinster army, I can officially do whatever the hell I want in this entire dynasty. I was in absolutely no rush to get to the capital, using the excuse of a divine decree from Lord Lao, claiming I had to bless and save all living souls along the way. I literally forced the Imperial Guards to become my personal bodyguards, along with the entire Royal Honor Guard. Although the 9th Prince was practically grinding his teeth in frustration due to the overwhelming public support, he had no choice but to play along with a sour look on his face. All the donation money flooding in from the local elites and powerful clans, I pocketed every single dime of it. And the next second, I ruthlessly dumped all those antiques and paintings right into the system's recycle bin, converting them like crazy into cold, hard gold coins. System: initiate bulk trading. Bulk buy cheap, mass-produced modern sweet potato starch. Expired, stockpiled grain. And high-calorie compressed biscuit bites. Low-end carbohydrate supplies. Exchange complete. Cost: extremely low. Quantity: 100,000 tons. Stored in the system inventory for future use. In this devastating famine, where even the Guanyin clay has been dug bare and every last bit of tree bark has been gnawed clean, this modern-day junk food I brought out is a priceless treasure that can literally bring the dead back to life. Every time we reached a new prefecture, I'd forcefully commandeer the largest local warehouse and hang up a plaque. Holy Maiden's Relief Granary. On the surface, I was opening the granaries to distribute food, earning the adoration of the masses. But behind the scenes, I directly recruited hundreds of thousands of homeless, able-bodied young refugees along the way. I'll give you a bite to eat, and you will pave my way and escort me. Standing on the high platform, I pointed at the massive, dark crowd below, my voice ringing out loud and clear. Starting today, you are the porters of the Su Family Trading Company. As long as you're willing to work hard, I will make sure your entire family never goes hungry again. This massive logistics network, built entirely by the locals, spread like capillaries, rapidly reaching every single corner of the Dajing dynasty. I didn't just deliver cheap grain right to the hardest-hit disaster zones. I also paved new trade routes along the way and began monopolizing the trade of iron ore, fabrics, and medicinal herbs. Talk about insane, pure, unadulterated profit. In just 2 short weeks, my initial capital swelled into an astronomical fortune, one that would make even the Dajing Royal Treasury drool with. But as they say, a tall tree catches the wind. Wealth like that breeds dangerous greed. Late one night, while our convoy was stationed in Linjiang City, I was lying comfortably on my daybed, scrolling through my system interface to count my dozens of newly acquired estates. Suddenly, the system's radar blared a piercing red alert. Warning! Unknown highly toxic substance detected in main grain warehouse number 1. My eyes snapped open, and I bolted upright. A cold glint flashed in my eyes. The grain in warehouse number 1 was the life-saving food meant for the 100,000 refugees outside. I quickly threw on the optical stealth cloak I'd redeemed from the system. It was the ultimate cheat code for moving in the dark. Slipping out the window without a sound, I glided like a ghost toward the back of the heavily guarded warehouse. Under the cover of a pitch-black night, a sketchy, limping figure was hunched over a massive mountain of grain. Clutching several yellowed paper packets in his hands, he was trembling as he poured a white powder into the open sacks of rice. As a sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, I immediately recognized that disgusting face. Lame Zhang? Didn't the system transmuter drive him completely insane? How on earth did he travel hundreds of miles to infiltrate my heavily fortified warehouse? So die. You little wench. So what if you became the saintess? Lame Zhang muttered, dumping the poison, his voice dripping with venom. Your eldest aunt said, as long as I dump this arsenic in here and poison those useless refugees outside, your title as the saintess will be utterly ruined. When that happens, you'll be sliced into 1,000 pieces, and the Su family's land and fortune will all belong to me. My eldest aunt. It all clicked. A wave of cold, murderous intent flashed in my eyes. That old witch might be locked up in the county jail for arson, but Magistrate Shen is a greedy, money-grubbing bastard. He's a spineless parasite who'll sell his soul to anyone with deep. She must have handed over all her secret savings, scraped together over the years, to bribe him. Not only did they buy off the Yu clan, but they even pulled the strings on this brainless cripple, ordering him to shadow me the entire way. They were so eager to deal me a fatal blow, planning to poison the refugees to incite a massive riot and frame me, a leftover woman. What a ruthless, underhanded play. Absolutely brutal. Absolutely diabolic. Standing in the shadows, I watched him dump every last drop of the poison. I didn't make a single sound, nor did I step forward to stop him. Oh, so you pieces of trash want to play dirty? Fine by me. I quietly backed out of the granary, a cold, bloodthirsty smirk playing on my lips. I'm going to show you what a true next-level annihilation and a fatal blow look like. I'm going to make sure you won't even know how you died. Standing in the shadows, I watched crippled Zhang dump the arsenic straight into the rice bags. Then, like a smug rat that had just gotten its way, he limped off and slipped into the night. Without alerting a soul, I summoned my system panel. System, initiate spatial swap. Ding! Locking onto primary granary number 1. Contaminated grains have been transferred to the isolation chamber. Ding! Swapping with an equal volume of safe aged grain. A faint white light flashed in the darkness. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of bags of grain were swapped out in a flawless bait and switch. The crown prince sneered and turned to go back to his room to sleep. There's a big show tomorrow. On a bright, sunny morning, the open ground outside the city was teeming with people. 100,000 refugees, holding their broken bowls, stared eagerly at the massive iron pots. The rich aroma of boiling rice filled the air. Just as the first pot of hot porridge was scooped out, right at that moment, a shrill scream suddenly erupted from the crowd. Don't eat it! This witch poisoned the grain! She wants to trade your lives for money. An old woman with disheveled hair rushed out wildly. It was my eldest aunt, who had escaped from the county jail. Behind her stood the trembling cripple Zhang. My aunt pointed right at my nose, her face twisted with smug malice. The refugees instantly erupted into chaos, dropping their bowls in sheer terror. The Huang family guards immediately drew their swords, shielding me in the center. I gently pushed the blades aside. I walked forward with absolute calm and picked up that bowl of steaming hot porridge. I threw my head back, took a huge gulp, and looked at my aunt. Is the food in the county jail not to your liking, that you just had to crawl out here to seek your own death? I slammed the empty bowl onto the ground with all my might. Porcelain shards flew everywhere like deadly arrows. My aunt froze, completely stunned. Her eyes practically popped out of her skull. Impossible! That was crane red mixed with arsenic. How are you still alive? Panicking completely, she grabbed Limpy Zhang by the collar. You useless piece of trash. Did you actually poison it or not? Watching them turn on each other like rabid dogs, I coldly waved my hand. Two of my personal guards instantly pinned Limpy Zhang to the dirt. I pulled out the poison packet my system had quarantined last night from my sleeve and tossed it in front of him. Limpy Zhang, plotting to murder 100,000 starving refugees. Do you have any idea what the punishment is for that? Limpy Zhang was terrified to his very core. A dark, wet patch instantly spread across his pants. It was her! This wicked woman gave me the arsenic! It has nothing to do with me, I swear! Limpy Zhang slammed his head against the ground, kowtowing frantically, as he pointed a trembling finger at my aunt. And the truth was finally out. In an instant, the eyes of the 100,000 refugees turned blood red. It was the raw, primal fury of starving beasts having their very last bite of food snatched away. No one knew who threw the first stone, but it struck my aunt squarely on the forehead. Kill this wicked woman! She wanted to starve us all to death! The crowd erupted like a tidal wave, completely out of control. They surged right past my guard's defensive line, tearing like wild animals toward my aunt and Limpy Zhang. I turned my back, refusing to look at the carnage behind me. There were no screams, only the sickening thuds of blunt impacts and the snapping of bones. By the time the crowd finally dispersed, only two mangled, unrecognizable corpses remained on the dirt. This is what happens when you push desperate, starving people to the brink. With them gone, I naturally took possession of my uncle's land deeds and completely seized control of everything the Su family owned. But just as I was preparing to distribute more grain, the thunderous sound of galloping hooves shattered the silence outside the city. A courier, completely drenched in blood, fell desperately from his saddle. Urgent 800 miles. The emperor has passed away, and the vassal lords are rising in rebellion. Rebelled? Hearing those words, the ninth prince, Jiangxi, who had been by my side all this, went utterly pale in an instant. The world fell into absolute chaos. The real bloodbath had just begun. The emperor's sudden death caught everyone off guard, instantly tearing the entire great Jing dynasty apart. Warlords raised their armies, and bandits ran rampant everywhere. The land, already devastated by drought and littered with starving people, was now ruthlessly consumed by the flames of war. Jiangxi rushed back to the capital overnight with his personal guards to fight for the throne, while I decisively retreated, taking my massive stockpile of supplies and my army of refugees with me. My plan was simple: build high walls, hoard food, and rule as a king in this chaotic world. The very first day I returned to Su Family Village, I blocked off every single road leading inside. System: open the construction shop. Ding, modern defense blueprints and quick-dry cement formulas have been selected for you. I spent a whopping 20,000 gold coins to exchange for massive amounts of building materials and modern defense gear. I called this gray cement powder sacred clay blessed by the gods. The entire village, young and old, along with the strong, young refugees I brought back, worked day and night. They mixed the concrete and laid the bricks. In just half a month, the once ruined Su family village was completely enclosed by a towering 10-meter-high wall. Outside the wall, we dug a trench 5 meters deep, filling it with deadly spikes and traps. On top of the wall, I even used spare parts from the system to assemble several heavy repeating crossbows. I had turned the entire village into an impenetrable fortress. Outside the walls was a living hell, with starving bodies littering the roads. But inside, it was a peaceful paradise, teeming with life. Using the system's high-yield sweet potatoes, we welcomed our very first massive harvest. Our granaries were bursting with golden sweet potatoes, and color finally returned to the villagers' faces. Old Father Su stood atop the high wall, watching the thick smoke billowing in the distance, his legs shaking like leaves. The whole world outside has descended into utter chaos. Can these walls of ours really keep those soldiers out? The old man was so terrified that his voice was trembling. I patted the cold, hard concrete wall, my eyes cold and sharp. Even if the king of hell himself comes, he'll have to wait in line outside my wall. This is my turf, Su He's turf. Anyone who dares to touch it dies. But in this dog-eat-dog, brutal world, a juicy piece of meat is bound to draw in countless vultures. Late one evening, the sunset bled blood red across the sky. The guard on the watchtower suddenly blew a shrill horn. Enemy attack! An army! They're coming right for us! I rushed up the city wall and pulled out the high-powered binoculars I got from the system. At the far edge of the horizon, dust was billowing everywhere. A defeated army of about 3,000 men was charging toward us like a swarm of locusts. Their armor was in tatters, their eyes bloodshot and crazed. They had clearly just suffered a crushing defeat and were desperate to pillage supplies and restock. The moment they laid eyes on our lush, green, and heavily walled Sioux family village, they practically drooled with raw greed. Their one-eyed leader raised a blood-stained blade and roared like a maniac. "Listen up, boys! There's food and water in there! Break in and you can pillage for 3 whole days." Inside the walls, the villagers turned pale with terror and descended into utter chaos. I took a deep breath and pulled a gleaming modern compound crossbow from my system inventory. "Everyone, get up on the walls! Prepare to fight." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a cold, absolute authority. "You want to steal my food? Then you'll have to pay with your lives to fill this moat." The one-eyed general's maniacal laughter echoed outside the walls. 3,000 starving, crazed soldiers raised their rusted blades and spears, surging toward our walls like a black tide. The villagers on the wall were shaking so hard their knees buckled, barely able to hold their bows steady. I looked down with a cold, detached gaze, a mocking smirk playing on my lips. System, exchange for 200 military-grade tear gas canisters, plus 4 heavy-duty, high-pressure water cannons. Exchange successful, deducting 5,000 gold coins. In an instant, the heavy canisters filled the battlements. I turned to Father Sioux and a few of the stronger men. "Strap these metal canisters to the ballistas." "Wait for my command." As the rogue army closed within 50 meters, I swung my arm down sharply. "Fire!" With a flurry of sharp whooshes, dozens of heavy crossbow bolts armed with tear gas canisters rained down, striking right into the heart of the retreating armies. There were no deafening explosions, only a sharp, piercing hiss of leaking gas. Thick, billowing white smoke instantly exploded within the crowd. It rapidly swelled, turning the battlefield into a suffocating sea of white mist. "My eyes! Oh God, my eyes! Ah! Help! Somebody help me! I can't see! I can't see anything! What kind of dark magic is this?" The ruthless, bloodthirsty soldiers from moments ago instantly turned into a chaotic mess, thrashing and rolling on the ground like headless, burned, hurt. Listen and say, against an ancient army with zero protection, the power of modern tear gas was a total, overwhelming cheat code. They threw down their weapons, clawing frantically at their own eyes. With tears and snot covering their faces, I coldly issued my second command. "Deploy the water cannons." These 4 high-pressure water cannons were connected directly to the bottomless well in the center of our village. Following my training, the villagers slammed the valves open. Boom! 4 massive torrents of water roared out from the city walls like furious white dragons. The immense pressure crashed heavily into the struggling soldiers. The men still choking in the gas were swept off their feet like dry autumn leaves in a gale. They tumbled into the ditches, utterly defeated, and yet not a single drop of blood, not a single life was lost. In less than 15 minutes, an entire army of 3,000 regular soldiers was completely brought to its knees. Their one-eyed general knelt shivering in the mud, holding his sword above his head, frantically kowtowing toward our walls. "Spare us, Divine One! Please, spare us! We surrender! We surrender! Please, merciful goddess, take us in!" I looked down at them coldly. "Drop all your weapons! From this day on, you belong to Sioux Family Village. You'll be working as our laborers on the outskirts. If any of you dare to betray us, you will be executed on the spot. After this battle, my name spread like wildfire through these troubled times. Without shedding a single drop of blood, I had utterly crushed a force of 3,000 men. Rumors spread across the land that Sioux family village was home to a brilliant female master. A few days later, the watchtower's horn blared once again, but this time it wasn't a disorganized band of retreats. The ground trembled beneath our feet. Thick clouds of dust filled the air. Tens of thousands of dark-armored heavy cavalry, in perfect military formation, halted outside our walls like an encroaching storm. On their fluttering war banners, a fierce, five-clawed golden dragon bared its fangs. Suddenly, a single rider broke away from the ranks, charging toward the city gates. The rider was clad in gleaming golden armor, his face cold and sharp as frost. It was none other than Jiang Si, the 9th prince, whom I had once saved when he lay dying. Pulling hard on his reins, looking up at the towering city walls, he used his inner strength to project his voice into the city, calling out, "An old friend has come to visit! Open the gates!" Slowly, the heavy city gates creaked open. Jiang Si hadn't brought his massive army. He only had about a dozen of his elite personal guards with him. Dismounting from his horse, he walked straight into Sioux family village. But when he saw those 10-meter-high, quick-drying concrete walls, saw the mountains of sweet potatoes piled high inside the granaries, and looked at the healthy, rosy-cheeked villagers, this ruthless, battlefield-hardened prince was utterly shaken to his core. The world outside is littered with starving corpses, yet your village is a literal paradise on earth. Jiang Si walked into my inner chambers and casually took off his heavy helmet. A thick, suffocating scent of blood clung to him, making it obvious he had just crawled out of a mountain of corpses. I calmly poured him a cup of premium Da Hong Pao tea, courtesy of my system. I asked in a flat tone, "Your Highness, have you pacified the Central Plains yet?" Gao Qi picked up the teacup, his eyes burning with intensity as he stared at me. "My imperial and the other princes have rebelled, but I have already executed 3 of those rebel kings and secured the vital capital region. Winning the hearts of the entire empire is now only a matter of time." Suddenly, he stood up, walked over to me, slammed both hands onto the table. Leaning in towards Suhei with predatory aggression, he whispered, "Come back to the capital with me. I will share half of this empire with you. I will offer the entire land as your betrothal gift and make you my empress of Great Jing." Any other ancient woman would have probably fainted from sheer ecstasy upon hearing those words. But I merely held my cup, gently blowing the floating tea leaves, and let out a soft chuckle. "What's so funny?" Jiang Si's brows knitted. "Your Highness, the position of Empress is far too exhausting and incredibly suffocating." I set down my teacup, looking him straight in the eye as I enunciated every single word. "I have absolutely no interest in low-level games like what I want is unrestricted, absolute trading rights across the entire empire. I want to build a transnational chain of merchant houses, stretching across every single prefecture, port, city, and market town in Great Jing. I want to control the empire's grain prices, along with its salt, iron, and textiles." Jiang Si froze in utter shock. He had assumed that what I craved was mere royal, but they never expected that my appetite was far bigger than mere power. I was going to become the #1 financial tycoon of the Great Jing Dynasty and grasp the entire empire's economic lifeline in my hands. After a brief, tense silence, Jiang Si suddenly threw his head back and laughed. "Good. You truly are worthy of being the woman this prince has set his eyes on. You want trade? I'll give you exclusive rights, but you must guarantee that the treasury of the Great Jing Dynasty will never run out of food." He untied a 9-dragon golden plaque from his waist, a symbol of imperial authority, and slammed it heavily onto my desk. "We have a deal." Late at night, Jiang Tu's army set up camp outside the village. Inside the commander's central tent, the candlelight flickered restlessly. Jiang Si was studying a map. His strategist in black, sporting a goatee, quietly stepped forward. "Your Highness, regarding Suhi, that woman's intellect is terrifying, almost monstrous. Furthermore, she possesses those mysterious provisions and weapons." The strategist's eyes turned cold as he lowered his voice. If she only seeks wealth, that is one thing. But if you ever harbors any treacherous designs, then this empire may no longer belong to the Jiang family. Jiaxi's hand, holding the vermilion brush, paused slightly. He remained silent. A flash of murderous intent crossed the strategist's eyes. He continued to urge, for the eternal prosperity of the great Jing dynasty, this woman absolutely cannot be allowed to live. I have already set an inescapable trap in secret. Tonight, we will make her disappear without a sound. Outside the tent, the night wind suddenly turned freezing cold. A deadly plot targeting me was already quietly unfolding in the dark. The night was as black as ink. The cold wind whipped dusk against the paper window, making a creepy rustling sound. I sat at my desk, flipping through the ledgers by the dim light of a candle. The army outside had already settled in, leaving the village eerily quiet, wrapped in an unnatural, deathly silence. Suddenly, the candle flame flickered violently, stretching my shadow long across the wall. The alarm blared sharp and piercing inside my head, with red warning lights flashing frantically. I didn't even raise my head. My body instinctively leaned backward. Swoosh! Swoosh! 3 flying needles coated in deadly orchid venom instantly pierced right through the thin paper window. The needle tips, carrying the icy chill of death, grazed the very tip of my nose as they flew and slammed deep into the wooden pillar behind me. The shafts were still vibrating violently, emitting a sharp, low hum. Before I could even catch my breath, the flimsy wooden door was kicked wide open with a loud bang. 4 masked men in black slipped into the room like ghosts. Gleaming steel blades clutched in their hands. Target confirmed. Kill him! The leader growled, raising his blade to slash at me. I just sat there, not even trying to dodge. I let the heavy blade hack straight into my chest. Clang! A deafening metallic shriek rang out in the silent night. The violent recoil split the leader's hand wide open. The blade nearly flew right out of his grip. He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock, looking at me as if I were a monster. Of course, he had no idea what I was wearing under these thin, ordinary clothes. System: exchange points for military-grade, lightweight, stab-proof armor. Forget these crudely made ancient weapons. Even a modern assault rifle couldn't pierce this thing. Is that all you've got? And you actually thought you could kill me? I sneered and slipped a system-customized, high-voltage stun baton out of my wide sleeve. Bright blue electric arcs crackled and hissed in the air, like trapped lightning. Zzz. With a swift backhand, I jabbed it right into the leader's neck. He didn't even have time to scream. His eyes rolled back, and his body went completely limp as he crashed to the floor, twitching uncontrollably. The remaining 3 assassins stumbled backward in sheer terror, looking at me like I was a demon straight from hell. Realizing they stood no chance, they crashed through the windows and fled for their lives, vanishing into the dark of the night. I didn't bother chasing them. Instead, I casually put away my stun baton and dusted off my chest. During that brief struggle, I had already slipped a micro-listening device onto the leader's collar without him noticing. System: connect to the audio feed. Static hissed through my earpiece, followed immediately by the sound of rapid, heavy breathing and frantic footsteps. The assassins were running for their lives. Finally, I managed to penetrate a heavily guarded barrier. Cut the crap! You couldn't even kill a single dragon girl? What use do I have for you useless trash? A cold, familiar voice rang out. It was the black-robed advisor with the goatee who serves Jiang Tu. My lord, please, calm your anger. One of them are despecterizing Hiran, but they will be living and she has dark magic protecting her body. It is truly bizarre. The assassin stammered in fear, only to be cut off. Shut up! If she exposes us to His Highness tomorrow, we will all die without a grave. The advisor paced back and forth, gnashing his teeth. Right then, a third voice came from inside the tent. This speaker spoke in a stiff, awkward dialect of the Dajing dynasty's official tongue, sounding incredibly sinister and venomous. Advisor son, don't forget our deal. Operation Great Drought has reached its most critical moment. We absolutely cannot let this woman, who can conjure food out of thin air, ruin my master's grand plan. Operation Great Drought? Hearing this through my wiretap, I suddenly clenched my fists. My eyes turned as sharp as daggers. But rest assured, the spiking of the water source has never stopped. The advisor lowered his voice, his tone dripping with sycophancy. Just hang on for one more month, and the Dajing dynasty's dragon vein water system will turn into complete dead water. Listen, by then, plague will run rampant. Without us deploying a single soldier, the Dajing dynasty will collapse from within. In the end, His Highness's empire will belong to your master. Hearing this, the blood in my veins ran ice cold. The endless drought, the thousands of miles of scorched earth, the horror of desperate peril. This was never some natural disaster sent by the heavens. This was a long-planned, insane, man-made disaster designed to destroy our country. An enemy nation had cut off the water supply at its source, and they're even poisoning it. How will you explain this to His Highness? His Highness cares too much about the world, but unfortunately, he is too soft-hearted. Once Dajing falls, he won't be able to secure his throne anyway. What a backstabbing, double-crossing snake. How dare they play dirty right under my nose? I took off my headphones, a murderous rage surging in my eyes, as if a massive storm were about to break. You want to destroy this land? You want to cut off the lifeblood of everyone on it? Have you even asked the system in my hands yet? Before dawn the next day, while a heavy mist still blanketed the village, I changed into sleek black action gear and slipped out of Sioux Family Village without making a sound. I didn't alert a single soul, nor did I waste time confronting Jiang Xi. That strategist is just a pathetic clown I can crush whenever I want. The real cancer lies at the source. I am going to drag this venomous snake out myself and rip it out by the roots. Fistum, activate all-terrain radar scan, lock onto the source of the Dajing dynasty's water veins, and track the point with the highest concentration of toxins. Instantly, a holographic blue map that only I can see expands in midair with a bright red dot flashing frantically. It points straight north, directly toward the misty snow mountains at the border of the Dajing dynasty. That is the heart of the underground water veins, the very lifeblood of the entire Central Plains. Deep in the deserted woods, I used my system points to summon a silent, off-road mountain motorcycle. I threw on my tactical helmet and twisted the throttle to the max. The black steel beast tore through the wilderness, leaving nothing but an afterimage in its wake. The roar of the engine was completely silenced by the system, but the sights along the way made my stomach turn. The dried, cracked riverbed looked like a ghastly wound ripped across the face of the earth. The riverbanks were piled high with the skeletal remains of countless animals. There wasn't even the shadow of a single bird in the sky. This wasn't some natural drought. This was a total ecological slaughter, brought on by lethal, high-concentration toxins. For 3 days and 3 nights, I pushed my machine to the limit, sleeping in the rough and eating on the go, until I finally reached the red danger zone on my radar. The misty canyon. The wind howled like weeping ghosts, and the canyon floor was a bottomless abyss, shrouded in a perpetual, thick fog. I lay flat against the freezing edge of the cliff, pulled out my high-powered binoculars, and peered down. When I finally saw what was happening, a cold shiver ran straight down my spine. What was once a roaring, rushing river had been completely choked off by a massive man-made dam. Stationed all over the dam were thousands of heavily armored soldiers, all wearing the uniforms of our enemy, the Northern Yan. And right below the dam, dozens of massive iron drums were being lowered on ropes. The soldiers were callously dumping a strange green powder into the last trickling stream of water. The moment the powder touched the water, it dissolved, turning the once crystal-clear stream into a murky, toxic, sickly green sludge. System, analyze the water sample. Ding! Warning, highly pathogenic plague strain and neurotoxin mixture detected. The mortality rate is near absolute. Those heartless bastards. They're not just trying to cut off Dajing's water supply. They want to completely slaughter the tens of millions of innocent people living downstream. Who's there? Suddenly, a harsh shout exploded from right behind me, shattering my train of thought. I whipped around, my pupils shrinking in shock. An elite cavalry unit of several hundred men had somehow snuck up right behind me, completely hidden by the thick fog. They held cold, gleaming, heavy crossbows, their icy arrowheads locked dead onto me under the dreary sunlight. The leading enemy commander sat atop his warhorse, looking down at me with a brutal, sadistic sneer. A scout from Dajing actually managed to sneak all the way out here. You must have a death wish. He swung his long blade with a vicious, pointing it toward the churning, toxic water below. Seize her, slice her tendons, hands and feet, and throw her into the poisoned river to feed the fish. Hundreds of armored cavalrymen spurred their horses forward, instantly closing the circle around me. Behind me was a bottomless abyss and a highly toxic river. In front of me was a forest of cold blades and spears, and a wall of bloodthirsty armored cavalry. There was nowhere to run. It was a dead end. I slowly stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes, facing the howling, biting wind. The commander slowly trotted his horse right up to me, looking down at me, mocking my helplessness. Woman, even if you get down on your knees and beg for mercy now, it's too late. Accept your fate! I raised my head, looking straight at his arrogant, self-important face, and flashed him a brilliant, radiant smile. Who said I was running? I slipped my hand into my pocket, tightly gripping the ultimate command key on my system control terminal. Since you love playing with water so much, and even built such a massive dam, a flash of pure madness sparked in my eyes. Then I'll let you drink your absolute fill. The howling wind whipped acrid smoke across the misty valley. The enemy commander's wild laughter was still frozen on his face, and his raised blade hadn't even had the chance to strike. Hundreds of armored cavalrymen had already blocked every single path of retreat. In the abyss behind me ran the world's primary water source, the very one they had I stared right back at his arrogant, smug face. My finger slammed down on the red ultimate command button on the system panel. Since you love playing with water so much, then drink your fill. System, highest clearance authorized. Target locked on the dam below. Material displacement, 10,000-ton class high solidification, military-grade incendiary gel canisters. Spatial displacement complete. Precision airdrop in progress. Before the words could fully leave my mouth, the sky over the canyon instantly darkened. Hundreds of massive silver metal containers materialized out of thin air, crashing down toward that sturdy man-made dam with immense force, like a terrifying meteor shower. Boom, boom, boom! The deafening crash of steel shattering stone echoed through the valley. The containers ruptured, and tons of thick, semi-transparent gel poured out. It was like a thick, deadly film of oil, instantly covering the entire polluted river and completely blanketing every single corner of the dam. Startled by this bizarre sight and the extremely pungent chemical smell, the enemy's warhorses began to neigh in mad, throwing their formation into complete chaos. What on earth is that? Archers, kill that witch, quick! The general finally sensed the fatal danger roaring at the top of his lungs. Hundreds of heavy crossbows were aimed right at me, but I didn't give them a single chance to pull the trigger. In your next life, be a decent person, I muttered coldly. Reaching back, I pulled a silver, windproof flare gun from my tactical vest, aiming the barrel straight down into the abyss. Bang! A dazzling red flare burst forth, trailing a long tail of fire as it plummeted like a falling star. It plunged precisely into the churning gel river below. In that very instant, boom! A cataclysmic visual storm erupted at the bottom of the misty canyon. This was no ordinary fire. This was a hellish inferno forged by modern military technology. The crimson flames devoured everything with unbelievable speed. A wall of fire instantly shot up over 100 meters high, and a terrifying wave of heat rolled over us like a tidal wave. On the edge of the cliff, those hundreds of northern Yan iron cavalry didn't even have time to scream. There was no bloody slaughter, only the ultimate extreme heat. In the thousands of degrees of blazing fire, they, along with their heavily armored war horses, instantly dissolved into silent ash, completely erased from this world. Crack, rumble. That giant dam, which had cut off the lifeline of the great Jing dynasty, crumbled from the inside out under the relentless, ultra-high temperature combustion. Tons of trapped water burst free from their shackles, roaring like a wild dragon imprisoned for 1,000 years, ripping through the ruins of the dam. System, clear out the inventory. Dump every single drop of water purifier into the flood. Ding! Deployment successful. The plague-infected pigs have been completely eradicated by the high-energy neutralizing agent. I threw my leg over the off-road motorcycle I got from the system. Just 1 second before the cliff crumbled beneath me, I slammed the throttle to the limit. The black steel beast let out a wild, deafening roar, carrying me right out of that fiery sea of death. Behind me, the roaring river, purified by the raging flames, surged forward with thunderous force, rushing toward the parched lands of the great Jing dynasty. The water was flowing, but this was far from enough. Years of relentless drought had turned the soil of Great Jing as hard as stone. Simply irrigating with river water couldn't save thousands of miles of cracked, barren earth. I returned to Sioux Family Village and stood atop the high watchtower, endlessly spending the mountains of gold coins piling up in my system account with grand ambition. System, activate the mass weather control weapon. Give me artificial rain. Weather control missile launched. Several micro-rockets loaded with high-concentration cloud seeding agents shot silently into the clouds high above. In less than an hour, the sky went pitch black. Storm clouds, locked away for 3 whole years, gathered once more. Low thunder rumbled deep in the clouds. Pitter-patter. A single ice-cold raindrop slammed heavily into the dry, cracked earth. Then, the heavens opened up in a torrential downpour. It's raining! Heaven has finally shown mercy! Below the walls, the villagers threw down their tools, dancing and sobbing hysterically in the pouring rain. They let out raw, heart-wrenching cries of joy. I watched the rain fall in silence, but my mind was already on a much grander game. Now that the water crisis was solved, the fate of the empire was sealed. The army of 9th Prince Jiangxi, moving as if aided by the gods, crushed every single rebellious vassal king within 3 months. Meanwhile, during those same 3 months, my Sioux's trading house evolved into an absolute, unstoppable economic behemoth. We monopolized 80% of the nation's grain trade. From the silk of the south to the salt and iron of the north, wherever there were people, my Sioux's logistics caravans were there. I no longer had to work the fields myself. I employed tens of thousands of shopkeepers and porters. Even the local governments, when they couldn't afford to pay their officials' salaries, had to come to my trading house on their knees to beg for loans. Using the ruthless logic of modern mega-conglomerates, I held the entire economic lifeline of the Great Jing dynasty firmly in the In year 1 of the new Great Jing era, the fires of war were finally extinguished, and my brother ascended the throne. It was a beautiful sunlit day. A grand, majestic royal procession, marching over fallen petals, came to a halt just outside the 10-meter-high concrete walls of Sioux Family Village. Gone were the clashing swords and the shadows of blades from the past, replaced only by a sea of red carpet and the joyous blare of ceremonial music. The chief eunuch, holding a bright yellow imperial decree, stood with deep respect right beneath the city gates. By the grace of heaven, the emperor decrees, the daughter of Su Shu has brought salvation to the realm, preserving the dragon veins of our empire. Her achievements shall shine throughout history. She is hereby bestowed the title of Duchess of State, hereditary and perpetual, granted the imperial golden medallion, and exempt from kneeling in the presence of the emperor. Once this imperial decree was read, the entire world was thrown into an uproar. In the over 200 years since the founding of the Dajing dynasty, never has anyone outside the royal family been granted such high nobility, let alone a woman. I never in a million years expected that Jiang Ti wouldn't force me into the palace as his empress. Instead, he kept his promise of taking the realm as my betrothal gift, and in a different way, granted me a position above all but one, even giving me absolute freedom over the economy, rising even above imperial power itself. Up on the city wall, my father, Old Man Su, had already fainted from sheer joy several times. Chuangle stood there, completely dumbfounded. As I took the heavy imperial decree, a satisfied smile curled on my lips. Duchess of State. That title definitely sounds a lot better than Empress. In the third year of the new Dajing calendar, the threshold of the Duchess's manor was practically worn down by high-ranking provincial governors and powerful aristocratic clans. Dressed in a simple plain robe, I was lounging on a rocking chair in the back garden, soaking up the sun. Everyone outside knew that although the emperor of the Dajing dynasty is named Zheng, the food in the people's bowls belongs to the Su family. Over the past 3 years, I didn't waste my time playing games of power. Instead, I poured every single bit of modern agricultural technology from my system into this land. Hybrid rice, pest-resistant soybeans, greenhouse farming, hydroponics. Using overwhelming technological superiority, I increased the agricultural yield of the entire Dajing dynasty by over the once desolate wasteland where starving people used to trade their own children is now a sea of golden wheat swaying in the wind, filled with the sweet fragrance. Even the children singing in the streets have changed their tunes, praising the descent of Goddess Su. Sweet rain blesses the earth, keeping everyone fed and warm. They don't even bow to the emperor. Every time my dad heard these nursery rhymes, he was so terrified he'd rush to bolt the gates shut, fearing the Imperial secret police would storm in and raid our house. But Changle, on the other hand, didn't have a... He spent his days parading around the streets with a gang of bodyguards, practically becoming the ultimate playboy of the capital. Sis, listen to what the opera troupe outside is singing. They're saying you're a goddess reborn. Changle munched on an apple, leaning in with a cheeky grin. I rolled my eyes at him and snapped, "Stop listening to that mindless flattery. Go tell our manager in the south of the city. The new batch of fertilizer must be loaded up and shipped to Jiangnan tomorrow." Changle stuck out his tongue at me and quickly slipped away. A tall tree catches the wind, and a subject's power threatens the crown. Throughout history, those words have sealed the doom. I controlled the entire economic lifeblood of the Dajing dynasty and had become a living deity to the common people. Could the man sitting on the dragon throne truly sleep at night? That night, in the dead of silence, a cool, early autumn breeze swept through the courtyard, making the leaves rustle. Just as I was about to turn in, my bedroom door was silently pushed open. A tall, slender figure in a hooded black cloak slipped inside like a ghost. "I've taken care of the hidden sentries outside. The security here at the Duke's estate is quite disappointing." The intruder pulled back his hood, revealing a sharp, chillingly familiar face. It was Jiangxi, the emperor of the Dajing dynasty. He was dressed in plain clothes, yet his commanding imperial presence was far more suffocating than it had been 3 years ago. I didn't kneel. I simply gestured casually toward the opposite chair. "Scaling walls and breaking into my room in the dead of night, Your Majesty? If word of this gets out, I'm afraid it might damage your royal reputation." I picked up the cold tea resting on the table and took a slow, casual sip. Jiangxi stared intensely at me, a storm of complex emotions swirling in his eyes. Wary reservation, deep admiration, and even a faint, barely perceptible trace of obsession. "So hey, you won." Now, the people of this empire only know of the Duke of State and have forgotten all about me, their emperor. He suddenly leaned forward, slamming both hands onto my desk. His voice was low, raw, and raspy. "You hold the wealth of the entire world in your hands. Once again, you've won the hearts of the entire nation. Just what is it that you actually want? Do you want my empire?" That question carries the emperor's deepest fear and suspicion. Anyone else would have been scared out of their wits by now, on their knees, begging for mercy. But I stand up and push open the window. Outside is the experimental plot I purposely kept. It's the exact same 3 acres of cracked, bone-dry land I faced when I first transmigrated here. But now it is bursting with the heavy golden stalks of hybrid wheat. "Your empire, Your Majesty? Your vision is far too small." I turn around and point to those 3 acres. My voice is so calm, it's terrifying. "Look at this land. This little screen from me just timing, still talking in the glow. It forced my father to sell me just to buy half a sack of moldy bran, and now it can feed millions of people." Jingxi freezes. He clearly never expected an answer like this. What I want has never been that cold, lifeless dragon throne. I take a step closer, looking this young emperor dead in the eye. I want a golden age, an era of scientific progress where every single person has food on their plate. I want a world where no more children starve to death, and no more horrific tragedies of families trading their own children for food. I couldn't care less who sits on that throne. All I care about is whether the granaries of the great Jing dynasty are full. My words echo with powerful conviction, shattering the silence of the room like a clap of thunder. In an instant, the suspicion in Jiangxi's eyes completely crumbles, replaced by a profound, breathtaking shock. He stares at me for what feels like an eternity, before finally letting out a long, heavy sigh. I am far inferior to you. This once arrogant emperor actually bows deeply to me. That night, Jiangxi and I talk deep into the night. Using the absolute highest clearance of my system, I leave the great Jing dynasty with its final, most precious spark of modern technology. Complete blueprints for agricultural irrigation and water conservation, an introductory guide to basic manufacturing and industry, and even fundamental medical theories. I hand over all of these groundbreaking modern secrets to him. I'm truly exhausted. The road ahead. Your Majesty must walk it on your own. At dawn the next morning, the gates of the Duke of Dingguo's estate remain tightly shut. I strip away my authority over the trading company, donating all of its assets directly to the imperial treasury. With Father Su and Chang'e by my side, I completely walk away from the chaotic vortex of power. I lived in peaceful seclusion in Jiangnan. Time slipped away, and the decades flew by. Fueled by the sparks of technology I had left behind, the Jing dynasty ushered in an unprecedented golden age of prosperity. The sharp wail of train whistles began to echo across the plains, and the smokestacks of massive steamships billowed black smoke across the open seas. When future generations opened the history books of the Jing dynasty, the most mysterious, captivating legend was still that simple farm girl who had emerged from the years of famine. Meanwhile, in a quiet, secluded manor in Jiangnan, I had already become a white-haired, frail old woman, lying back in a rocking chair, basking in the warm sun. Suddenly, in my mind, the system panel that had been silent for decades let out a crisp electronic chime. Ding! System detection. Current dimensional civilization level has successfully upgraded. Ultimate objective achieved. Host authority has reached maximum level. Unlocking new modules. A row of glowing golden letters slowly flickered across my retinas. Interstellar dimensional trading system activated. I opened my eyes, looking up at the endless blue sky, and a familiar wild smirk crept onto my face. Well, looks like my retirement is over already.